In today's lecture, we will begin with cardiovascular physiology. If we see the evolution of life on Earth, life first evolved in seawater, and unicellular organisms first came into existence. These unicellular organisms, they could easily take in nutrients from the seawater and they could easily diffuse out waste products back into the seawater by a simple process of diffusion. But as the life further evolved, it became a bit more complex as multicellular organisms came into existence. In case of multicellular organisms surrounded by seawater, those cells which were in direct contact with the seawater, they could easily take in the nutrients and they could also diffuse out the waste products. But there were certain cells which were not in direct contact with the seawater. Therefore, they could neither receive the nutrients nor they could diffuse out the waste products. So, to overcome this problem, nature provided an alternative arrangement for the multicellular organisms. Nature provided the humans or other multicellular organisms with interstitial fluid. This interstitial fluid surrounded the cells. Interstitial fluid surrounding the cells. It is interesting to note that its composition is similar to that of the seawater. Now, each cell could easily receive the nutrients from this interstitial fluid and they could also excrete out the waste products from this to this interstitial fluid. But there was again an issue. These unicellular organisms were surrounded by vast majority of ocean. So they had plenty of resources, plenty of nutrients at their disposal. And they had enough space to excrete out their waste products. But in case of multicellular organism, this interstitial fluid is limited. So, there is a scarcity of nutrients and limited amount of waste products can be diffused out. To sort out this problem, nature has provided us with a very beautiful arrangement again, and this is known as the cardiovascular system, in which blood flows through the blood vessels. As the blood flows, it brings in nutrients for the cell and takes away the waste products from the cell. So how does this blood flow through the cardiovascular circuitry? For this, nature has provided us with a pump that is known as our heart. So how does our heart pumps the blood? Now we will see in the next section. So we have seen that the primary function of our heart is to pump the blood. Our heart is a four-chambered structure. This one is the right atrium. This one is the right ventricle. This is the left atrium. And this is the left ventricle. The right atrium of our heart receives deoxygenated blood from the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. From the right atrium, the blood passes to the right ventricle across a tricuspid valve. From the right ventricle, the blood passes to the lungs. Through pulmonary artery across a valve that is known as pulmonary valve. In the lungs, the blood gets oxygenated, and the oxygenated blood passes to the left atrium through pulmonary vein. From the left atrium, blood passes to the left ventricle across a bicuspid valve, popularly known as mitral valve. Finally, the left ventricle ejects the blood into systemic circulation through aorta, and here the blood again passes across a valve known as aortic valve. So we see that the primary function of the heart is to pump the blood into systemic circulation. So how does the heart accomplishes this function? We know that heart undergoes rhythmic contraction and relaxation. Rhythmic contraction and relaxation, which leads to pumping of blood. And heart undergoes this rhythmic contraction and relaxation because of certain electrical activities going inside the heart. Electrical activities. So we can say that electrical activities inside the heart leads to certain mechanical activities, which is contraction and relaxation. Or we can say, whenever the heart contracts, its chambers contract, it pumps out the blood, it ejects the blood, and this is known as systole. And whenever the chambers of the heart relax, they are filled with blood, and this is known as diastole. So these systole and diastole, these are the mechanical events. So the electrical events inside the heart leads to mechanical events in the heart, which finally leads to pumping of blood. So the electrical events and the mechanical events which occur in one beat is known as cardiac cycle. Which we will study in our next discussion.